Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for our school directors meeting this evening. To get the meeting started, we will ask for a roll to confirm our attendees. I'm Board Chair Julie Bocanegra, Vice Chair Victoria Bradford.
Here.
Director Rob Perkins.
Here.
Director Jenny Gronwalt.
Here.
Director Rachel Rogers.
Here.
Superintendent Mike Merlino.
Here.
Administrative Assistant Lori Stroll.
Here.
Thank you. And there's many others that are on tonight to help us with our meeting. Good evening again. My name is Julie Bocanegra. The time is now 5:32. Under Governor Inslee's Proclamation 2028, in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, temporarily suspends portions of Open Public Meetings Act. The proclamation requires that all attendance at an open public meeting not take place in person, but occur remotely, including the board directors and the public. Our meeting this evening is conducted via Zoom audio webinar. At this time, I would like to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so our first order of business is to adopt the agenda. We will entertain a motion to adopt our agenda.
Director Gronwalt moves to adopt tonight's agenda.
Director Perkins seconds.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. It's an aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so from there, we'll move on to special recognition. This month is National Bullying Prevention Month. We have a special recognition and a proclamation to read. I'm not sure if it's actually called a proclamation or a statement more. Director Perkins will be reading that for us this evening. Rob?
Rob, you're muted.
Rob. Rob?
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Okay.
Just had to switch the document over.
Ah.
Where'd it go? Evergreen Public Schools Declaration for National Bullying Prevention Month. Whereas bullying is a severe, pervasive, physical, verbal, or electronic act or conduct that has been or can be reasonably predicted to have a negative effect on any individual or school site. And whereas various researchers have concluded that bullying is the most common form of violence affecting millions of American children and adolescents annually, and whereas targets of bullying are more likely to acquire physical, emotional, and learning problems, and students who are repeatedly bullied often fear such activities as riding the bus, going to school, and attending community activities. Whereas Evergreen Public Schools recognizes that all students deserve to be safe in school, online, and in the community, and that bullying is not acceptable. Now therefore be it resolved that Evergreen Public Schools does hereby support National Bullying Prevention Month and encourages parents, students, and staff to spread messages of kindness, acceptance, and inclusion. And be it further resolved that the Board of Directors of Evergreen Public Schools supports National Bullying Prevention Month and encourages all staff and students to unite against bullying and share the message that no one deserves to be bullied.
Thanks, Rob.
Signed, President, Board of Directors.
Thanks, Rob, for reading that for us tonight. You know, I think we have one of these statements or proclamations, and sometimes, and we talked about it last month, that sometimes they come from the governor's office, sometimes they're ones that we do. And I don't think that there's a month that goes by that, you know, that we're not recognizing someone in our system or addressing something. And this one is particularly, you know, important to me because even in the world we live in and the climate that we have as adults, and I mean, this one addresses our students primarily, but you know, bullying has been around for many, many, many years, and it just takes on different forms and different avenues of way kids, get to each other. And I think that it even spills over into our adult lives and just the climate of how the nation is right now. And I think it's just important to remember that, kindness matters. And that's the message that we should be giving to our students every day and throughout our system. So super important message.
I agree. I think especially during a time like this when everyone is tired, everyone is under tremendous and unusual amounts of stress, especially within the schools. I've said it before, I really like the way that Chris Reichdahl puts it. He pleads with us all to extend grace. And I do the same. If we can do that, if we can give each other the benefit of the doubt and start focusing on things like microaggressions and the fact that it happens on social media and it can come and go faster than adults can see it. It's not simple, but we do need to be developing a greater awareness of the warning signs and developing better approaches to how we respond to a student or anyone who says this was not okay. And I hope that we will. I really do.
I agree. All right, anything else from anyone? All right, thanks again, Rob. All right, so now we'll move on to our board consent agenda. We'll entertain a motion for approval.
Director Bradford.
Oh.
You approve tonight's board consent, the consent agenda, sorry.
Director Bradford, second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. It's an aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
And Rachel?
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, then we'll go ahead and move on to our superintendent consent agenda. We'll entertain a motion for approval.
Julie, I move that we approve the superintendent consent agenda as presented.
Director Grunwald, seconds.
All right, been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. It's an aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
All right, thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is the superintendent's report. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, yes.
That is correct. So Mike, do you have a report for us this evening?
I do. I've got a number of things. I'll start off with the updated numbers from the county. If you saw, they released those numbers and I think the case rate is up to right around 115 per 100,000. So we've seen the progression of that number increase. Have been on Zoom meetings with Dr. Melnick for the last, honestly, I think we've been on about 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 in the last week. And I think he believes that the numbers could increase a little bit more next week. And we've, as we had previously discussed, kind of paused our expansion of any kind of programs until we start to see any type of a decline in that number. So we continue to watch that. It's, I think, an unfortunate trend, but it is the trend that we're working with right now. So I mean, we talk a lot about the cases per 100,000. I thought it'd be nice to talk about a few other things that are going on that are more school-related things that we might talk about and be happy about with respect to if this was just a normal year. So the first thing I want to mention is that we a couple years ago applied for it's called a Gear Up grant, which is a grant through WSU, and I think it's actually managed out of WSU Tri-Cities. And The grant, initially our grant was not approved, and then we got information back on it recently that they were looking for a big district. Most of the districts in this program are actually on the east side of the state, but we have been approved for this grant. It is a grant it identifies 6th and 7th grade students and provides mentoring, academic support, training, and tutoring throughout their secondary career, encouraging them to attend college. So they work with kids from 6th grade through middle school, through high school, and the whole goal is to mentor and work with kids to get them to college and get them through college. We've got 3 schools that we're working through this at. 3 middle schools were targeted in the application in line with the identified student and school metrics. Covington, Cascade, and Y East will be participants in this. So when you think about this, along with the, I can't remember the name, the College Bound Scholarship that kids have opportunities. So, you know, as long as kids get signed up in middle school for that and maintain a 2.0, if they're free and reduced, they will get college tuition paid for in state. And this now is a program, a grant that we've got that will help provide support for kids to keep them focused and on track to make that happen. So that's a great thing. I know Bill Ullman has been working with them on the grant application, and then was really happy to share that we were actually approved for this. And they had their first kind of startup phone conversation on that meeting last week. And so we're excited about that. So that'll be something we'll be tracking as we move forward. Second thing that Bill shared was that Amy Haynes was working with WSU, their College of Medicine, and they have started a partnership to get students in the College of Medicine at WSU to work as mentors for identified students at Gila High School, to encourage them to attend the WSU College of Medicine. They had a preliminary meeting. We've got an MOU with them on that. It talks about the mentors will be open to students at the pharmacy and nursing schools, depending on student interest. There are students in the program, in the medical school program, as well as pharmacy and nursing schools. It'll be sophomores, open to sophomores and juniors at Gila. And it's another one of these programs that we're excited about, making that connection and giving kids opportunities and trying to kind of have some things that are normal that are occurring in a kind of an unnormal time. I will also mention last week I had the opportunity to be at the first Cascadia Superintendent's Council meeting. In that meeting, normally what we do is we'll have kids kind of talk about their programs and share what they're learning and what their experiences are. And in this particular meeting, they actually zoomed in students from various districts. I think we had 3 students from Evergreen. There were some from Vancouver, from all districts. And they kind of asked the students kind of what are some of the challenges that they're facing in the environment that we're in right now. And at least 2 or 3 of them talked about the motivation being a struggle for them, the staying focused and getting on a daily basis. They talked about some of the students have situations where they have the technology at home. They've got the structure, the kind of the infrastructure and the support at home. They are concerned with, you know, some of the students having different family situations and how remote impacts everybody differently. Time management, struggling with time management. You might think they've got more time, but I think there's just so much time spent at home that then becomes a problem. So it was great, first of all, to see students. Some students are in certification programs, have been returned on site at Cascadia, ones that need to have some of the work done to make sure that they can advance towards their programs. So that was a good experience to enjoy that the other day. I think Rob might have sent out an email to everyone, and I might have also, but the the summer food, the meals program that we operated under last spring that provided free meals for everyone, not only in the school district, but anybody that came to be served. So any community students or individuals was at the very last minute extended through the month of December. They have now extended that through the whole year. So we will not have basically have free meals all year for anyone K-12. And we continue to have, I believe almost every I think every building is open for students to come in various times throughout the day. And then in addition to that, we're still delivering meals to students at Marion since they don't have a school to attend. So that's actually, on the one hand, it's a good thing. The one thing that I've raised concern with my meetings that I have with Representative Stonier and Representative Harris is that there are funding things like the LAP program that is based upon the free and reduced percentage in the district without any requirement to actually submit an application other than, there are things that you can benefit from by submitting an application, but I think that there will be likely an impact despite the outreach efforts we're making for that rate to go down, which could potentially impact our LAP funding. So not this year, but in future years. So we are continuing to communicate that. I'm continuing to communicate that with our folks in the legislature so that they understand and have the ability to potentially react to that with respect to formulas that are funding us for next year. Clarissa will talk about this in just a little bit, I think in the workshop, but you all saw that we did appoint a district equity team. That was a great step as we move forward with all the work that's occurring within the district from Clarissa. Just wanted to mention that. You will hear more about that. I participate in a lot of Zoom meetings with other school district superintendents, and often they talk about how many students are on campus for part or most of a school day. So I had reached out to ask our folks within the district about what types of counts that we have. And again, remember, we have the kindergarten small group program occurring in all of our elementary schools. We have the student engagement teams identifying students that are being brought in K-12. And then we have students on IEPs as well that are being brought in for service. And then the WIA with their recent guidelines of allowing small pods of athletes to be in groups. We have done that in Evergreen as well. So in total, we've probably, if you include the athletics, we're right around a little less than 2,000 students a day that we're seeing. When I think about the numbers that I hear from some of the other districts, it's 2,000, 2,000 is not the 24,000 that we would typically see. But I think it's, we're providing opportunities for students at maybe a little greater rate than some of the other school districts are. So I'm thankful for that. I know that our parents are thankful for that. I know that our families are thankful for that. But I think we also need to specifically mention how thankful we are for our staff for being on site to serve the students when they come in, particularly our kindergarten teachers. Our kindergarten teachers have had an extremely heavy lift. While you're teaching small groups and divvying out the work or having to do the work of the remote learning, as well as creating lessons for the asynchronous time for students. So it's a lot of work. There's no question that our kids are benefiting from it and our families are benefiting, and I believe the staff are benefiting from it as well. But it's a lot of work, and I just want to make sure that we all are aware of that. We're working with the teaching and learning team, with our principals, with our teachers in kindergarten to see what we can do to kind of help mitigate those impacts. And I appreciate I appreciate the effort from our teachers. I appreciate the effort from our staff to try to work together to see what we can do to help resolve some of those. But that's the 2,000 number, while that seems quite low potentially, is actually, I think, quite high comparatively. And of those 2,000, it's probably about 380 kids that are on for athletics. So it's probably a little over 1,600 kids a day are on site for some sort of an academic program. And remember, we've paused any expansion of that. We were talking about expanding that potentially in the student engagement program in our secondaries. And we had kind of talked about the path for first grade, potentially second grade, and that's all been paused as we've talked a few times. We also have students coming in for library materials. If you're ever on Twitter, we've had a number of our teacher librarians that have processes in place for kids to go online and check out books. That sometimes they're delivered, sometimes they come in for picking them up. We've got supplies that we're supporting students with, particularly elementary school, where we've not required parents to pay for supplies to bring them into school. So we're trying to support their technology, and then meals as well. And we've got a number of examples of schools that are going out and doing home visits and just checkups on families and making sure that everyone's doing well. I think it is encouraging to hear as many positive stories that as we do from while remote learning 2.0 isn't the preferred choice, but I think we are getting a lot of positive feedback on 2.0, definitely as it relates to last spring, but just I feel like a lot of good feedback coming in from parents, and that's a good thing. The last thing I'm going to mention is with athletics coming on, I know that we've had a few meetings where there have been some conversations and questions about co-curricular activities, whether that's music, whether that's theater, whether that's Knowledge Bowl, whether that's any number of yearbook, there's any number of them. And we asked Bill Oman to reach out to the building principals with Corinne Ormson to kind of try to create a, what is the metric that we could use in a remote learning situation to engage with our kids and allow for opportunities for kids in this wide variety of areas, whether that's putting music pieces together remotely, whether that's doing a play that's done remotely, and bringing those parts together. So I think Bill did really good work with those folks and brought forward a kind of a schedule that would look at us funding the co-curricular stipends at 80%, which would represent the last 8 months of the school year, with specific outcomes, whether it's dance team, whether it's Knowledge Bowl, whether, there's still, in many of these cases, virtual performances, virtual competitions, virtual concerts. So I think that that's a real positive thing that, the number of, that might not be on site, because a lot of these music programs with singing in particular are problematic having people together, but we are going to get a lot more kids engaged through these co-curricular options. And that's went out just this week. So people are being made aware of that. So that's, I feel like, great news. So while we spend pretty much time every day thinking about reacting to and adjusting to the COVID situation, and honestly, I get the frustration from our principals, from our teachers, from our families, because it feels like, even from my perspective, one day there's one set of rules, 2 days later it's a different set of rules, a week later it's another set of rules, and then every time that happens to us at the district office, then that potentially happens to the building. So, we're trying to be responsive, and trying to get feedback, but we're trying not to move too fast so that these changes continually impact what we're doing. But I will say, I think everybody is doing their best. I do think we need to give everyone, I think the term is grace, for what's happening. But I also believe we need to hold ourselves accountable and not just rely on grace, and do our best and make sure that we're kind of doing our best to hit it right the first time. I'm not saying that we've done that, and I'm not saying we're perfect, but we need to aspire to make that happen every time. And I feel good about how we're working together to try to make that happen. So that would be my report for today. And then I know there's a finance budget report, so I'll talk more about that stuff in that time.
All right, thanks, Mike. Can I just ask a clarifying question? You mentioned 2,000 students. Is that per day, do we think?
Yeah, that's daily.
And is it different students coming in each day? So I'm just,
I would say that when you're talking about elementary, you know, a lot of those are kindergarten students, so they're coming in a couple days a week. So some of that is repeat. In the middle schools and the high schools, those numbers in the student engagement teams stay steady. It's the same kids that come back, then they may rotate through another group of kids. So it'd be more for a few days at a time as opposed to at one time. I was with Heather Thiessen at Pacific, and she was talking about the way that they bring in teachers on a rotating basis to work. They've identified kids just to kind of get them caught up. Like they're struggling a little bit. They just need a little bit of one-on-one direction, socially distanced. But the direction, and then they get themselves caught back up, and then they go back into remote, and then they maybe bring in other kids or other kids that have been identified. And they do that kind of in a rotating basis with the teachers, so it kind of touches everybody. So it kind of depends on where it's at. But that would be a daily number. And that would also represent, in some schools, the same kids for a few days or a week or two at a time. In some schools, it's the same kids for 2 days, and then it's another group of kids for another 2 days, and that type of situation.
okay. Thank you. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That comes to around 6.5%, 7% of all the students at any given time during the in-person instruction in the buildings is what the math suggests to work out to me. And then the athletics is about 8% total. If you add the athletics to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're talking 2,000 students, well, if you're talking 1,600,
Yeah, just divide that by 24,000.
Yeah, 1,600 regular students aren't, and our numbers are a little, it's close. I mean, that's close.
Yeah.
And then 380 or so athletes. I think that now that we're doing the co-curricular, now a lot of this obviously is going to be remote and it's not going to be on site, but that's a whole nother avenue that we're opening up to a really large number of kids, and we can get those numbers also. And that's a real positive. It's positive for our staff and it's a positive for our kids as well.
You talked a little bit about the enrollment rate for free and reduced, and how you're advocating for that. Do you have a sense of the difference numerically this year as opposed to previous average years?
Well, we haven't, no, I don't yet, but we will. So we'll have an October number relatively soon. But I don't have that right now. I think it's just kind of at this point, kind of what do we think? But I mean, the reality is what happens is anybody that's in the free and reduced program has an automatic grace period for 30 days the next year. They actually waived that grace period as well. So I think the day that we were going to remove everyone from the free and reduced, learned the day of that they were waiving the grace and saying don't take them off. Some districts had already done that because you've got up to the first so many days to do that. We hadn't done it yet. So anybody that was free and reduced last year that's still in our district would still remain on our free and reduced count. It's really going to be the kids that are new to the system that potentially, or in the year last year somehow dropped off, that would be the one. So if you think about it that way, that we didn't remove any kids yet, I don't know that we feel that impact yet because of that. And then also when you think about the decline in enrollment, it could actually generate a little higher free and reduced percentage if you think of it that way. But I don't know the answer to that right now, but I can find out.
Do you think there's a way to build a sense of like an engagement rate in online learning, maybe by using the rubric that they built for the SET teams to use? Like I'm curious to see what like the 25-point support level analysis that they told us about in the curriculum presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they use that. I think the one thing I would hesitate. So the question I would ask is there an easy way for us to look at the engagement rate through attendance or some other way? Mm-hmm. Because just attendance this year and the changes to attendance have been a significant workload issue for folks. You know, normally it's kids are here, they're not here. Now you've got to go in and You got to verify that they've logged in. It's just a whole different world. I can ask that question. We have our instructional team meets every Wednesday morning, and I've been going to some of those meetings, and so I can raise that tomorrow morning. They're all on here right now too, so they probably, I haven't gotten any texts giving me an answer yet. So
I knew there wasn't going to be an immediate answer. I didn't expect one. I know that as we get into the legislative session, they're going to ask for numbers and data, along with the stories that we tell them about what it's like and how difficult, or mostly difficult, it is. And so that's on my mind.
One thing I would say about the legislature, I think the thing that we really need to push hard on, there is a lot of that, the engagement. I mean, I think it'd be good for them to get a sense of what it actually means to be a remote learner, and maybe sit in on some Zoom classes that are being taught, so that they have an opportunity to understand what goes into the work behind it, rather than just to say, oh, well, we've got everybody's remote, nobody's participating. I think kids are participating, and we can share a lot of the narrative from the families that we hear. I mean, we hear back from families that actually say, you know what, I understand you're wanting us to look at hybrid, but this is going really well, pretty well for us right now. So let's not start something unless we know it's actually going to be able to continue. Maybe we hold off a little bit. So there are some families that feel that way. I also think that there just has to be a fundamental change of thought in the legislature about what education looks like moving forward, because the type of education that we're providing right now has all been just ALE education, which requires a mountain of paperwork. So you think about all our ALE teachers at Legacy, or at IQ Academy, or at Home Choice, and the work that goes into the individual learning plans, and then the documentation that's required to prove that they're participating. It's at the same time, we've got this situation going where overnight we just basically said we got to be in remote learning. I get the whole, there's we got a $9 billion shortfall. We do have a $9 billion shortfall, but until we can come back in the way that we used to be in school, it's actually going to be more expensive for us to have kids in school, because it likely takes more staff than the staff we had before, because of all the other requirements that are put on us. So I kind of feel like we're always on the defensive, and I understand that we have to be, and we got to be respectful, but I think it'd be great for some folks to walk in the shoes of people that actually have to live what they're living right now, whether that's with kids at home as parents, whether that's students, what they have to face every day, or whether it's teachers or counselors or teacher librarians or principals or any of them that are, this stuff people didn't go to school 6-8 years to figure out how to do this stuff. They got about 8 days. And I think we're doing a tremendous job. And one of the things I shared with our legislators this morning is, very likely after this election, my belief is that there'll be some sort of a stimulus package, because they're really close. It feels like we're just holding off on a stimulus package until one side wins and they can claim victory. But when that stimulus package gets passed, there's gonna be a lot of money for states that come down. We benefited from the CARES money to the tune of about $5 million, and that's significantly helping us this year. I think the word that we need to get to the legislature is, if the money comes again, that needs to come to schools. We need the schools to safely open the right way, and even just to help with the enrollment decline that we've seen. I was on this call this morning. We support it in the House, but we don't think the Senate supports it. Or, so whatever it is, I think it's going to be a challenge for us to get the money that was meant to come to us because of the state shortfall. I get it with a $9 billion shortfall, but now that came down to about $4.5 billion. I saw the revenue collections for the month of September were up another 80, 90 million, something like that. That's going to project out over time. So we've got to be respectful, there's no question, but we've got to also be advocates for ourselves. In that vein, this Friday, myself, representatives from Vancouver and the ESD are going to be meeting with some staffers from and Melissa Gomboski in the I believe the House of Representatives, that will then be setting the stage for a meeting with I think the appropriations, some of the people, the leaders. I can't remember the names of all the kind of big shots in the legislature, to tell our story. This is a great opportunity for us to tell our story, and we need to do well at that. And I think this is a time where like my background with doing what I've done for 20+ years is very beneficial in these conversations. So I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to do that. I think that was 22 minutes. I'll stop now.
Thanks for taking care of me.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the good news report. We have our Director of Communications, Gail Spoler, who's joined us. Hi, Gail. Oh, you're muted, Gail. There you go. Welcome.
Thank you. So we'll just run through some of the good news, what you see, of course, on our banner photo. We just finished up Hispanic Heritage Month. It actually runs from the middle of September to the middle of October. So it's 30 days. It just kind of spans 2 months. But our ELL staff put together some wonderful weekly programs and did it remotely for parents. And so the banner photo is one of the evenings that they put together to celebrate the culture of Hispanic Heritage Month, and as it relates to schools, as well as sharing some of the cultural information. You know, as Mike mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work delivering meals, supplies, and things like that. And so we've been out covering that. We've had pop-up food pantries at a number of locations. We have great partners out in the community, specifically Share and the Clark County Food Bank, that have really pivoted to help our parents and families make sure that they have access to food and the kinds of food that they need. And we also Mike touched a little bit on making sure that kids are getting school supplies. And that could be assignments, that could be you know, supplies like paper, pencils, crayons, whatever. And our librarians have started checkout processes. So we went out and captured and followed along with one of our bus drivers. She ran a route that included Burton, Cascade, and Evergreen high schools, just out dropping supplies off to students. As we move along, I was at we did a virtual groundbreaking at Mountain View, and I know several of you participated as well. But I looked over and there were a number of students over painting on the windows. And so I asked some of the Mountain View administrators, and what they told me is that the Thunder family, that kindness, caring culture is continuing, and that the leadership students have taken on sharing a kind word of the month. And so this month's words are thanks and Thanksgiving. And so we captured some photos of the students painting murals on the walls or on the windows at Mountain View. And they're just trying to keep that culture alive. And so that when students are either coming in, like maybe to pick up supplies or dropping something off, they're continuing to get those engaging messages. So some of those photos. Moving on, as Lori scrolls. Oh, well, I do have to, I take this platform and am excited to brag about our own department. Once again, we won a number of awards at the state level, the Washington School Public Relations Association. We were singled out for 3 of our video stories, and you'll see the clips there, as well as for our social media presence. We also, because of the expertise that we have on our staff, we've been asked to judge entries at other states. So I spent a good day one weekend recently judging Arizona's school public relations, and then as a group we did the Ohio video entries as well. And so it's always fun to win awards, and it's also fun to go in and judge and then help other states as well award their awards. So moving on, Lori. Professional development. We just went behind the scenes a couple weeks ago on our professional development day and caught folks doing professional development. We also have been following along with Matt Solberg. He's an instructor, science CTE instructor out at Frontier Middle School, as he has done a series of engaging projects to try and get his students both interested in the subject matter, as well as just provide an outlet for them to have field trips, because clearly we aren't doing field trips, or to get out and explore. And so we caught up with him and did a video story as he was doing QR codes in sites around Frontier Middle School that had science-related things, everything from, you know, identifying, well, there were holes in a tree, and what those were woodpecker holes, but you didn't know that until you actually physically went out there and used a phone or a computer and were able to read a QR code. And then it talked about what kinds of woodpeckers and the habitat and things like that. So very engaging, and those aren't available just for his class, but he's made that available for any of the students in that area that can come out to Frontier. Just a really interesting way of how our teachers are really going above and beyond. And then, of course, we mentioned about our librarians, making sure that students have access to books. And of course, I mentioned a little bit about, we did a virtual groundbreaking at Mountain View High School. They are starting to do something more than just move dirt around, but we also wanted to highlight walls going up. And these pictures actually, even though they were only taken several weeks ago, if you go by Legacy Transitions and then the new Hollingsworth Academy, you'll see walls, like 3 times as many walls going up as you see here in the pictures. But this particular set of pictures is the gym that's going to be shared by those programs, and something that they haven't had a real dedicated area for physical activity. And so this was kind of a milestone to see the concrete poured for the gym at that complex. So just a little bit of the good news that we captured over the last month or so.
Thank you, Gail. Good stuff. All right. How about a budget update, Mike?
About a budget update, Julie. Before I do the budget update, I really quickly, we did that Mountain View groundbreaking, and Rachel was there. That was great. Enjoyed that. We got some gloves and some goggles and everything. And I was driving by there the other day, and I was thinking how I in my comments that I feel like I screwed up, because I should have, in my mind, paid tribute to the first principal, especially with Matt Johnson there, the first principal of Mountain View High School, who was one of the great employees of Evergreen School District, Jerry Pyland, and should have mentioned him in that, and just in honor of him. So I forgot to do that. I want to make that statement. And Lori, I see you going back to the agenda. Thank you. My face was too big on the screen there for a while. It was getting scary. So the budget. So let me first off start with last year. We're really close to closing the books. We've been talking about what that number looked like for year end. Our ending fund balance, somewhere 26 to 28 million. We're looking right now at just a little over 28 million. So you'll recall last year we had actually budgeted for our fund balance to decline a little bit, and then as the year went on, it looked like we likely wouldn't decline a little bit, but we'd probably break even thereabouts. And ultimately, with the closure, I've talked many times about the fact that it ended up actually increasing our fund balance. So where we're at is about 28 million. Of that 28 million, we've also had questions about the CARES money. What have we claimed in the CARES money? That was made available to us to start claiming funds, I think, in July, this past July. It runs, I think, through the fall of 21, or maybe even into March of 22 or something like that. Our allocation was about 4.9 million. We've claimed about 1 million of that. So out of that 28 million, roughly 1 million of that was from the CARES ESSER funds. So we had budgeted to receive really none of that this past year. So that inflated our fund balance by a little bit. But so basically we went from around 23 million to a little over 27 million this past year. In the current year, we've had 1 month of payroll. We've had 2 months of enrollment. It's going to take more than 1 month. I mean, this is such a atypical year, obviously, for such obvious reasons. But for people that do the financial work, it's very atypical, and particularly in Evergreen because we've obviously furloughed a number of staff members, but we've been kind of slowly bringing some of that staff back. So when I talk about the number of kids that are coming on campus, that represents additional bus drivers that are coming on not on campus, but transporting kids. I think we've got 250 or thereabouts drivers. We've got over 100 back driving now. We brought back, we're starting to consider bringing back some of the secretarial hours in a couple situations we have in the middle school as they're working to try to create the schedule for second trimester because of the idea that we may be in hybrid, we may be remote. They have to kind of completely rebuild that second trimester schedule. So some of our registrars have come back. We've brought back staff in elementaries to work with kids during recess, the kindergarten kids that are there, socially distanced safely. But we've got playground paras. We brought in security in the secondaries to be on site with kids there, as well as be available to staff the COVID rooms in case there's anybody that has an illness at school. So we're bringing staff back, but when you bring staff back, it makes it more difficult to estimate what those numbers are going to look like for the year, because 1 month we might have had this many hours, the next month we have another number of hours. So what I typically would do is wait until probably November, December, but we'll be looking here after October payroll, which will run in the next week. Then again in November, but we'll start making our estimates of where we're looking on the expenditure side. Obviously, there's a lot of things that will reduce expenditures, but I've shared multiple times the items that will also reduce revenue. Enrollment is one that obviously will reduce revenue, and we had talked about 800 to 1,000 students less district-wide, most of that occurring in elementary. We've actually seen a little growth in high school, a little bit of a decline in middle school that almost offset one another. So pretty much the decline that we've seen is primarily in elementary. So I went back and looked at, part of the other thing is we're thinking about this year, you got a typical year, then you've got this year. And so I wanted to look back and see typically enrollment from September to October, what do we see and what did we see this year? Because part of it is we have 10 months of enrollment, so you have to average that over 10 months. You can get your September number in a typical year, you get a pretty good idea what that number is going to be for the whole year. This isn't one of those years. So I wanted to see, how does this year look like it has typically? If you think about, I have a file that I've kept track of it, of enrollment K-12 by grade each month, as far back as 2006, 2007. So I look back 2006, 2007 to 2020, 21. And if you figure 13 years before this year, and if you figure 6 grades, K through 5, that would be 6 times 13, 78 months of potential enrollment growth or decline between September and October. Of those last 13 years, there were 3 months where we saw an enrollment decline in any one grade. So you might have a first grade go down by 3 kids, or a fourth grade go down by 10 kids. So it's not something you see. This year, the only grade that we saw an increase in enrollment from September to October was kindergarten. Every other grade, 1st through 5th grade, declined. And the only grade that we actually have kids on campus, and it's just might be anecdotal, but anecdotally, the only grade that we have kids coming to school right now in a broader number is kindergarten, and that's the grade that we actually saw an increase. Now, that could be for any number of reasons, but it's interesting. So then I looked at, okay, if you look at K-5 from September to October, what does the increase typically look like compared to what we see this year? Over those years, the largest increase, we grew 544 kids from September to October in 08-09. Until you get to the year 2016, 2017, every year we grew between 300 and 500-ish between September and October in elementary. When we get to 16, 17, 18, 19, 19, 20, the numbers are more in the 150 to 250 range, still growing, but not as much as what we typically. This year, we declined by 3 students from September to October in elementary. So what it's obviously saying is that we're not going to see the type of growth throughout the year. The only thing that might mitigate that is whenever kids come back. For the current year, it's going to affect the estimates a little bit, no question about it, which will affect our revenue for the current year. And obviously, as I've shared, basic ed enrollment, if you figure about $9,000 roughly a student, so 800 kids, you're talking about over 7 million, 1,000 kids, 9 million. When you lose basic ed enrollment, because we're almost at the cap in special ed, or we're right at the cap in special ed, it means we lose funding for students that we have to serve within special ed appropriately. That's maybe another $1.5 million. I've also talked a lot about the transportation issues that we face with respect to the counts and not transporting kids and not being in the formula. We are transporting kids, but not the numbers, obviously, that we would typically see. So I'm expecting anywhere from a $2 to $4 or $5 million decline in transportation revenue. And then I've also shared the unfortunate, horrible situation that we've had to manage of furloughing our staff, which isn't just in Evergreen, but really throughout the region that has occurred and throughout the state that has occurred. But in that process, then there's a impact, obviously, on the unemployment that's paid to those individuals, and those the districts in Southwest Washington are part of a pool, so our rates have increased. So there's a pretty significant impact that we will continue to look at, we will continue to follow. And I would really look at when we get to the November payroll into, late November, early December is when we'll start to get probably a clearer picture of what things look like in terms of the savings versus the revenue decline. And we'll take a deeper dive, I think, at that point in time into that. I just want to continue to share the concern. And honestly, the concern as we go forward, if we see enrollment numbers where they're at now, and if we're projecting some impact on our fund balance, the fund balance declining this year, as we kind of have anticipated all along was going to happen. My concern is as we build the budget for next year, what's the conditions? Are kids on campus? If they're on campus, what's the impact of budgeting for enrollment increase? Obviously, if we budget for the enrollment increase and we've staffed for it and then the kids don't show up, we've got a problem. If we don't budget for the enrollment increase, it means that we could have a mad dash to hire people very late or even after school starts. So there's no good solution. So really, to me, we're in the year, we're doing what we can in the year we're in. I'm already thinking about next year and what this is going to do in terms of how we build our budget for next year and the impact. And I had mentioned in an email to the board, we're selling, and I've mentioned it a few times, we're selling bonds, $275 million next Tuesday. When you go through that process, you go through a ratings process from a rating agency. And we have been rated, I think, probably on the, obviously not at the best levels. The ratings typically, a lot of it has to do with the economic health of the community you're in. A significant component of it, though, is the fund balance you have in your district and also kind of just what are the general things that are occurring. Our district size, which we've talked about often, our fund balance is not, I think we're maybe between 7 and 8% total. I think there are districts our size that are between 10 and 15%. And when we made budget decisions a couple years ago, we made the decision to allow the fund balance to go a little lower. We didn't view ourselves as a bank. We needed to, in a rainy day, to use those funds to help with some of those reductions. At the time, though, we did talk about the potential impact on our rating. And then there was even some conversation, what does that mean if your rating drops? What does that actually mean? Well, we went through that process here in the last couple of weeks, and we were informed last week that our rating has been dropped by Moody's. And so, I mean, I don't personally think that they should have done it, but they did. I think that the individual we talked with actually argued for our rating to remain at the same level, but they have a committee that makes those decisions. And they basically just said, because our fund balance isn't high enough and they don't really see us having the ability to build a balance back up high enough, that they needed to downgrade, reduce our rating. Ultimately, we will sell bonds next Tuesday. We'll get a sense of what impact, if any, that has on our interest rates. I think that our financial advisor, Mark Pressing, believes we may pay a little higher interest rates. It's just a matter of what is the increase. One of the things that's frustrating from our end is it's not a good look to have a ratings downgrade. At the same time, our bonds are insured with the full faith of the state of Washington's underlying bond rating. So, it's kind of silly. The whole thing is kind of silly, but it's just illustrative of the impact of the fund balance on even the financial institutions when we sell bonds. We still expect to have a good bond sale on Tuesday. We expect to have multiple bidders, and I will obviously report back to you next week on that as well. It's a very interesting time. It's a very interesting time. I can't tell you how many times you can say that a day, but I say it a lot. That's all I have for right now.
So on the rate, the interest rate, since rates are low right now, I mean, I'm like on everything else are low, but so will our rates be comparable to what we got in the past because rates are so low right now?
I think our rates are still going to be better than they probably have ever been. It's just the rating change may mean a little bit higher on those bonds that are paid out over the 18 to 20 years. So Mark talks about 5 basis points, which it's like 0.05. So instead of like a 1.5% interest rate, it might be 1.55. So when you spread that out over $275 million worth of bonds, I still don't anticipate that it's going to be something that affects tax rates. It's just kind of a, so we still will get a great rate. There's no question. And these could be the best rates that we'll ever see. You mentioned the bond. I mean, I think the bond, the whole program, honestly, really, I mean, obviously there's things that could go better on projects. This could have done this way, whatever. But on the big picture, in terms of budget and in terms of the what we're doing and what is happening, I think the timing of it really couldn't have been better. We're kind of hitting it as the costs of construction are dropping. So when you think of it, we are in the middle of construction or completed 5 elementary schools. The very first one that we bid was the highest price of all of them. And actually that was negotiated with a GCCM project at Sifton. But every elementary school that we've bid over the last 2 years since then, the price has gone down. And they expect that to happen at Burton as well, as being the last of the 6 elementary schools. So a really good thing, They've done an amazing job, and real pleased with how that's gone. But the bond sale will go well, excited about it. And I just wanted to let you know, I had mentioned in the email, the ratings change. Just wanted to kind of tie that back to this conversation around the fund balance.
Is that a Moody's rating that you sent to us? Is it the municipal Moody's rating?
Yeah.
Even the downgrades, I took a look at the charts and it's still, superior credit, even in the short-term scales. So it really isn't a significant, like an over significant thing. And I'm glad you're watching it though.
And I don't think we'll be the only ones that will. I think you get to just the situation, the enrollment decline. How do we react to it? You know, if we were making all our decisions based upon a rating agency, we'd have a $40 million fund balance instead of a $28 million fund balance, and that's not what we're here for. So.
All right, thanks. Any other questions for Mike on the budget before we move on? All right, so we'll move on to board comments. Really the only thing I was going to mention is we did have our bond update last week, and it sounded like most of our projects were obviously on time and within budget. That's actually given us the opportunity to do some extra projects throughout the district, which is really exciting because not only just the buildings that we're doing, but some of the capital renewal projects and things. So Sue and her team have done a great job managing that. So any other board comments?
Hey, I think it's apropos, as we were talking about online learning and the stories and the alternative learning, I guess, administrative workload, is that came up in our discussions in the Online Learning Advisory Committee, where I have a seat. And that's a place with representation from the private schools and the public online schools who join the Zoom meeting kind of with a smile on their faces because their enrollment is way up. And so there was some talk about, you know, making sure that people understand which online schools a student has a right to attend and how the organizations stay certified. But there was in the meeting definitely a pushback from folks like Kristen Whitaker from Spokane Virtual and the WEA representative about public schools, and OSPI must not forget, we're all doing online learning. And so I was able to participate and tell a couple of our stories in connection with that. That is not the source of the question about engagement rate. That's an ongoing thing from last spring, but there is a sense and an expertise in that committee that they're hoping will begin to communicate some hope and best practices about online learning to the rest of us. There was also some talk about the state getting into a contract with a learning management system so that becomes less expensive for everybody, which I just toss out as a point of data, is the kinds of things that we talk about. I was also involved with the social and political expression message collaboration last Thursday and had a great meeting. We spent about 2 hours, I think, wordsmithing and preparing a multi-district draft proposal, which I'm not sure if that's going to be presented tonight or we're going to wait for a legal review, but it's making progress there. And then I wanted to mention our WASDA regional meeting took place on Monday. It was a Zoom meeting, and they broke us up into groups to talk about to workshop answers to questions like, as a community and educational leader and elected official, what does your community need from you right now? How can you be a force for good? And what concrete action steps? And everybody within the Zoom meeting put their group's answers into the chat. And I had a little fun last night taking the words of the chat and putting them into some word clouds that I emailed to everybody. But the words that loom largest in those discussions were things like communication. That was the answer to all three of those questions, really. Positivity, trust, honesty, empathy, transparency, community, planning. So their worries are our worries. And it was a good experience to participate in. There were so many people there that I don't know who else was there from that. I might have seen Jenny's name in one of the squares, but we weren't grouped together. And then just a final mention that we do read all those email messages that are sent into the board of directors. And I ran into a teacher, her name was important. It's the Emerald Librarian. Where did that go? Jennifer Hanna. We talked for a few minutes about what it's like. And I asked her how the kindergartners were doing in person. And our conversation kind of bent toward that idea that the work is really hard, but really worth doing. And the kids seem happy to be at school. But you could still see that it's a lot more work than teachers are used to. And they were already hard workers, these folks. And I said to her, it's okay to worry and to send us letters about the worries, because worried people are the people who care. And I wanted to make sure that that got into the public meeting somewhere, is the recognition that if you're writing to us and you have concerns, that we recognize that it's because you care. That's all I've got.
I attended the district equity team meeting with members of cabinet, and it's good to see the work is moving forward. Just met with the gentleman that walked us through our Courageous Conversation meetings, and just getting more and more information about how to use our skills that we're gaining into doing this work. So it was good.
All right, anything else? No? I actually had earlier asked Jenny about in Victoria, you might know this too, but it looks like the foundation is doing their event virtual next month. Is that?
I
haven't
have
seen
not
anything.
been I have not been with them for a while,
Okay.
so yeah.
I haven't
know.
seen anything online, but Jenny said she got an email. Is that right, Jenny?
Sorry, yes. So because I'm actually the contact for the sponsorship with my company, I received an email from them with the new date. And
That's
letting
how
us
I
know.
found out.
Okay. But that's all. I did get another email this morning or today confirming or requesting information. I guess they are going to actually provide meals for some of the sponsors, or if the sponsors want them. So they'll send them out to them. But that's all I know at this point.
Yeah, I don't know, but there's, I think I have on my calendar like November 14th or something like that. Is that still the date?
I guess, but
The new one, the new date for the virtual, yeah, that came out, I believe that came out last week. Or week
I just
before.
haven't seen anything on like their
I
events
haven't.
page or the website. So I just wanted to make sure that really is happening.
So it's
I
just
mean,
like
I've gotten 2 emails from them. So from the admin, I'm assuming.
Okay.
I haven't received any emails about it.
No, I haven't heard anything either.
Yeah, I'm just curious because that'll be something that we'll probably want to support, obviously. So
Jeff Angelo mentioned it to me once on a phone call, but he didn't have a date at that point. So I know they're doing it, just no details yet, not really.
okay, so something that we should probably be looking for. So all right.
I'll be asking about it.
Yeah. You might be you might be speaking at it, Mike. You might not even know it yet, right?
This
Virtually.
is like maybe from right here then, huh? So we're just zooming in.
Yeah, I think that's how it works.
I'll have my water with me.
I'm moving that day, so I may be looking a little rough. Not all dolled up like you would normally be.
Well, the thing about virtual is you can do it anywhere, right?
That's right.
So
Unfortunately,
Gail sent me a text message saying foundation meeting tomorrow afternoon, and we'll update as soon as we hear more.
perfect.
appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gail.
Yeah,
All right,
I've also heard students. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, sorry, did you have something else, Ron?
Oh, no, just a quip is a lot of students are realizing that the snow days are a thing of the past in remote learning, unless they're really
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. All right, future agenda items. Anybody have anything they'd like to add?
Just hope that we're talking about the co-curricular stuff as it ramps up. That's really good news.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could come in a superintendent's report, but I really appreciated hearing about that today.
Yeah, it is good
And
stuff.
I can share with everyone kind of the look at what types of activities will occur with each of because they did a great job of kind of outlining the stipend, the activities, and then the names of the folks at the buildings that participate in those stipends to support the kids. So I'll get that information to you.
I like hearing anything that's getting our students engaged and being part of the school, even though it looks much different right now. It's good stuff when more and more students are getting involved.
They're talking about trying to get like the board president engaged in like the virtual concerts and singing with
Yeah.
the kids.
I wouldn't mind giving that a try myself.
I might sit in and listen to one, or but I don't think I'll be singing.
Rob just said he wants to participate, so
Rob can do the singing.
A year or two ago, I sang in a classroom with the boys freshman choir at Union, and it was a lot of fun.
There you go.
I miss being in a choir. I do.
All right, we'll move on. Next up is citizen comments. I don't believe that anyone signed in before the noon deadline. I'm going to confirm with Lori that that is correct.
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Lori. So with that being said, we are now going to have a short recess. We will then reconvene for our board workshop, where we will have talk about referendum measure 90, sexual health education. We're going to have an equity and inclusion update, another legislative update, a board meeting debrief. So do we need to take a couple minute break and then get back on the call?
5-ish minutes, be nice.
Yes.
Okay,
please.
a couple minutes and we'll join back up. Thank you. Who is leading us through?
I'm happy to.
That's you, Erin?
Yes, it's
All
me.
right. You want to get us
Hi,
started?
everyone. Yeah, good to see you all. Happy to be here tonight to talk about some of what's embedded in Senate Bill 5395 and the referendum 90 that would either allow it or disallow it from taking effect. As you know, in general sense, it's about requiring comprehensive sexual health education for students grade 6 through 12, excuse me, beginning in the 21-22 school year, and then beyond that, K-12 full scale starting in 2022. It's important to note that we're here, a lot of the questions that we're hearing are around especially the earliest of learners and what this means for them. So I tried to put together in a shortened form for you a sense of the frequency that's embedded in this legislation, as well as the focus. And then in the final column to the right, give you a sense of the degree of change that means for us in Evergreen. And I'll just give you for example, they talk in this legislation about instruction needing to be provided in K3 at least once in the K3 years. But the sole focus of that instruction is around social emotional learning and the social emotional learning standards, which talk about management of emotions, establishing and maintaining healthy relationships, responsible decision-making, etc. This is already in place in our schools, so that represents no change for us in Evergreen as it relates to K3 learners. Crystal Wolf is our new science specialist, Tosa, and she's on the call today to talk a little bit about what this means for our 412 program. You can see embedded in this document a sense of the focus of that instruction. That's also found on the OSPI website, as well as in your probably your voters guides to outline what it means to be a comprehensive sexual health education program. And on the right-hand side, Crystal will talk us through the current program and then what few shifts will be necessary should this referendum be approved. In the final, before we get to Crystal, just in the final row at the very bottom, when it talks about all grades, in this legislation, it talks about providing parents notification of when this is going to occur, and options to view and participate, and ultimately to excuse if they wish to their student. These are all things that we already have in place here in Evergreen, so that represents no change for us. So Crystal will talk to us a little bit about 412. And then we'll see what questions you might have for us.
We can't hear you, Crystal.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. It's good to be with you all. Erin, if you could click on that current program link. This is an internal webpage that sort of summarizes our program. It can give you a sense of what we already do. So at the top is a short overview. And then scrolling down, it basically goes by grade level. And so there are 3 slideshows there that are from some of our previous parent preview nights. And so if you're kind of wondering what sort of information have we offered to the public in the past, those 3 slideshows would represent that. Scrolling down further, we have our elementary school, human growth and development. And if you can go down a little further there, Erin. It jumped for me. I don't know if it's my connection or what. But in the elementary level on that webpage, we have kind of the framework that we use in Evergreen to address our social emotional learning. And so you can look through some of those things that are unique to Evergreen and how we interpret those SEL standards. And then we have our 4th and 5th grade, and that's where we really see that instruction in the comprehensive sex education that's outlined in Referendum 90. And I went ahead and consulted with Andrea Gerber, who's our public health expert with the FLASH curriculum, which is the curriculum we have adopted out of King County. And so she took a look at all of our modules and was able to give me a sense of, were we meeting the requirements for Referendum 90? And is there any changes that she would want us to take a look at to make sure we're in compliance with that. And so looking at 4th and 5th grade, really she said we have pretty much everything we need to. The only update is that you see under 5th grade and under 4th grade, sexual exploitation, day 1 and 2. Flash has updated their modules for that. And so it's really the same module, but with updated language. And so that represents one of the changes that we would recommend. And Erin is highlighting some links there. So I've been able to obtain some of those preview copies of those updated units. And so you're welcome to take a look through those. So that basically represents what we do with 4th and 5th grade. And generally that is in our science classes with science teachers, sometimes with support from counseling and nurse staff. In the middle school level, 6th, 7th, and 8th, again, our content was basically in line with the requirements. there is one addition that we would like to take a look at, and this really gets into more clarity with consent for students, boundaries, bystander skills, and healthy relationships. One thing about the middle school rules of dating module is that it also addresses some requirements in another related law that really relates to responsible behavior, avoiding exploitative relationships, and making sure that students have a sense of what the law says about victims and consent and what are sexual offenses for minors and what would that look like. So it goes into just the things that students need to know about the law and consequences for behavior. So that's something that we might want to take a look at adopting as a new module. But beyond that, our middle school curriculum is in line. Moving on to high school, we have our high school health course where we are able to teach all of these things. The new law does recommend a frequency of an offering of twice to students in 9th through 12th, and that health course typically occurs in the 9th grade. So we'd like to explore some options for some integrated offerings in 11th and 12th grade. Not a full course, but with our upper grade levels, just an understanding that the topics and the maturity level of our students change as they go through their high school career. And so if there are ways to have some integration into some of the senior courses or 11th grade courses, that might be an opportunity to really hit that requirement of twice, which is actually quite ambiguous in the language and the wording of that Senate bill. So that would just be something to explore if we want to make sure to have that comprehensive sexual education flowing all the way from the lower high school levels through the upper grade levels as well. Any questions?
So I guess if I'm understanding it correctly, the only,
Oh, Julie, I can't quite hear you.
can you hear me now?
I
Can you hear me?
can hear
in
you.
my audio
Yeah,
settings?
I don't know.
Yeah?
There might be a
Yes.
problem with your earphones, Crystal.
Oh,
I can hear you, Julie.
Yeah, we can hear you, Julie.
okay.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. So the only two significant changes that I see is the middle school portion about relationships,
Rules of
positive
dating.
relationships, and then high school reintroducing it a second time in 11th or 12th grade.
Mhm.
Everything else is pretty much what we've already been doing.
Mhm.
Okay. That's the only question I had.
I came out of 2 online discussions, little Zoom meetings with parents about exactly this kind of thing, because I was asked by a friend to start talking about the facts around R90, just as a person out there, not trying to represent the district or anything close, but since I had knowledge of how we adopted the curriculum, because we adopted the curriculum, I was able to talk a little bit about that. If there is, how are you doing the parent nights this year?
Excellent question. So
Yeah.
I was able to consult with Andrea at Flash about that. And her recommendation was that we sort of push back until the hope is we eventually get to in-person learning and
Right.
have an opportunity to do an in-person preview. That being said, we want to plan for if we are still in remote or it's not safe to have, the public come in for previews. And so what she will be able to set up for us is basically a virtual preview where I will have several virtual curriculum that I can check out to parents. And so they would get a username and a password and a set number of days to preview the curriculum. They would check it out, check it back in. I would pass it on to other parents.
Like borrowing a library book?
Basically that, yeah. And there could also be, some sort of Zoom call or introduction to kind of set up that preview, but we would be able to virtually check out the materials for parents to take a look at.
Is there a way for them to watch the supplemental videos?
That's the other thing that I need to still work on of how we would be able to go about that. Mm-hmm.
How much time do you need before you can let the material out? What kind of time frame are they giving you?
So, I mean, we typically offer our previews a month, at least a month before we would be teaching this. And kind of taking a look at our numbers right now, we're hoping again to be able to be in person at some point. So that's kind of where I'm at, is let's kind of wait and see. But if it looks like coming up to third trimester, we're not going to be able to do in person, that's when I would want to set those up and get those rolling.
So are we deferring instruction district-wide on these subjects until third trimester in order to kind of try and wait the pandemic out? And
There also, I can tell you that the Flash program is in the process of developing asynchronous pre-made modules, so that awkwardness of teachers doing online instruction with students can be alleviated with some asynchronous models that can be offered to us.
Okay.
So they're starting with the middle school. Those are almost done. And then they'll be moving on to working on creating those for fourth and fifth as well.
That's good to start with the middle schoolers. Let me see. So let me see if I can rephrase this. Okay. And then I want to touch on our adoption and make sure that I understand that correctly, is that we need time to make the material ready and to get the releases needed, the copyright releases needed to check the material out to parents.
That's already readily available. It would just be getting those licenses from Andrea, and that she has those. It's just resetting the passwords and getting me the codes.
Is there a cost to that?
We did have a brief conversation about that, but I don't have a clear number for you of what we would need. Yeah.
Yeah, I not the amounts, just whether there's a cost. That's what I'm curious about. Parents are asking me what the roadblocks are to just having it on a web page, and we talked before the meeting a little bit about that.
Off the top of my head, the digital license is $99 per year per teacher, so it is an extensive cost. Yeah.
Not as high as an AP physics textbook, though.
This is true.
Yeah, as I look at the internal web page, the note here is the modules listed above that you talked about are the only modules adopted. Other modules might exist in Flash, but the board has not approved them. Do you have any sense of whether the people who are objecting to Flash in the community are raising content from modules that we have adopted or have not adopted?
I have not heard directly from community members, but I have heard that sometimes the public is looking at the whole list of modules and having concerns about one or two of them. And generally, those are not the ones that we've adopted.
I can tell you, Rob, historically, that's exactly where the questions usually come in, is a misunderstanding around whether or not we have adopted in full the Flash curriculum. And usually they're targeting or zeroing in on very specific lessons that have not been adopted. The other set of questions that is more recent with the coming of this legislation is around the K-3 and a fear of what that actually looks like, and a misunderstanding about what the rules of engagement will be there. So those are the typical questions, though things have been real quiet on that front as of late. We had a lot of traction on that last year.
Yeah. Is there any part of the sexual health education, not the social emotional pieces, but sexual health education pieces, that is ever incorporated in or folded into any other subject? Or are they taught as a block during a period of time during the year?
Definitely not in any formal way. I can't speak to exactly what happens in every classroom. From my experience as a high school science teacher, like I have gotten questions from students before, and have been judicious about where I go with that. But in a formal way, no, it's just this block of instruction that represents the adopted curriculum.
So when you've seen it crop up, it's student-driven questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to teach us about this, and and make the materials available. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Crystal or Aaron while we have them? All right, thank you. We appreciate you being with us tonight. All right, next up is Clarissa, who's going to give us an update on our equity initiative.
Can I say one thing? Rob mentioned the work that they had done this week on the kind of the guidance, and you made a question. You asked a question about legal review, and that's happening now. So that is why we're not getting deeply into this tonight. And with that, I will say I'm here to introduce Clarissa, who looks like she's performing tonight. You got a nice microphone.
I was saying maybe she'll be part of the choir.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is perfect. I'm sorry, I couldn't let it go.
Thanks. I actually do love to sing. However, I'm not doing that tonight. My computer just told me it was going to shut down and update. So my husband allowed me to use his setup. He uses this when he does his virtual meeting. So
yeah, this is nice. Your husband's got a nice setup there. Good for him.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mike, for pointing that out. So a few equity updates for you all. We are about 22 schools in with our Courageous Conversation, the experience professional development for our certificated staff in building, and that's about roughly 675 folks. And so we are over halfway through providing that level of foundational professional development for our certificated staff. I'm really excited about that. And to date, the feedback has been majority positive. And those that are not are just simply sharing their perspective, and I happily dialogue with them about that, and will continue to do so. And as those professional developments are happening via Courageous Conversation, the administrators and instructional coaches in the buildings are continuing with Courageous Conversation in their staff development and early release days to continue with working with the protocol that they're introduced in that day and a half. And additionally, to support the leaders so that they can continue being leaders of equity in their buildings, we had our first monthly leadership academy with a racial equity focus, but an equity focus in general for the year. And that went very well. They will continue to have that throughout the year so that they feel very supported in this work. Just as any other, topic that we introduce, there are, entry points and access points, and we want to make sure that our leaders feel very supported as they are leading equity in their buildings. Mike mentioned earlier about the completion of our selection process for the District Equity Advisory Committee. And we did announce those folks, and we had some very passionate, and as Rob mentioned before, we have some community members who really care about this work, which I appreciate. And so there are a couple of areas in which the community has shared that they would like to see a little bit more representation on the committee. And so I will be checking back in with our selection team to discuss those groups so that we make sure we have that representation on the committee. But we'll be having our first meeting on next week, and as you can imagine, trying to align the schedules of parents, teachers, classified staff, community members, it's not the easiest thing to do, so we may have to have a couple of intro meetings rather than one. And then we'll be setting the dates for the rest of the year during those meetings for our equity committee. During our first meeting, we'll also, besides, getting to know each other, we will be able to talk about some of the preliminary data that we have from our equity audit from Beloved Community to go ahead and set some potential goals for that group. And then we will narrow and focus those goals as we get the audit information back from Education Northwest. And speaking of that, you all should be on the lookout for the presentation from Education Northwest and our equity audit on December 15th. They will be coming in and sharing with you all their findings. And they are, they're really excited about coming in and presenting for you all. I'm excited for you to hear from them. And we've had some, like I said, some preliminary conversations about some of the data they're getting back. And it's going to be very, very useful for us to start talking about our equity policy and some other things that we want to make sure we have in place to keep our equity transformation in full effect. We also have about over half of our schools who have themselves participated in the beloved community equity audit. And we will be meeting with that consultant beginning on the 22nd and then the 27th and the 30th to chat with them about what those results look like and what next steps could be. And that whole process, if you will, just continuing to use data for our qualitative information for the equity transformation is something that will be ongoing. But what I really look forward to is the qualitative information when we start having our community affinity group meetings. And once we have our first equity advisory committee meeting, we'll establish the dates for our community affinity group meetings as well. And I'm really excited about getting those going. So that's a brief update there for our equity and inclusion.
So how many people did you mention are involved in all of the various different groups? Like number of people? I think you might have said it earlier.
So the selection team had 9 folks for the equity advisory committee. The actual committee now currently has 13 members. But again, we're looking at potentially adding a couple more to make sure we are inclusive of a couple of groups that the community has very passionately reached out to me saying that they should be represented. And I agree. We equity work is something that is not in a straight line. And so I'm being responsive, but within reason, to make sure that, we have those voices captured. So that group will be about 15. And
Oh, I was just going to say, because the school equity teams, how many people are on a school equity team?
Yeah, so some of our schools already have their equity teams established, but the schools have been asked to assemble a team of no more than about 8 folks to help complete the beloved community equity audit survey. And that will be their first rendition, if you will, of an equity committee in their building. But through the leadership academies that I mentioned before, our leaders are going to learn how to make sure they establish, if they haven't yet, very effective e-teams or equity teams in their buildings. And for those that already have them established, how to make sure that they are effective in their buildings. And so those teams can range. Every building wants to make sure they have representation. Some are adding parents to their equity committee they'd like to, as well as students. And so that looks a little bit different in our current situation of what adding a parent and student looks like. But obviously, those are very important members of the school community. And so that team, the number of folks on that team could vary by school location.
So we have hundreds of people, literally, that are having their voices heard throughout this process, right? Which is great.
Yeah, when we start the community affinity groups, I've got big dreams about how many people will be logging on for that. And we want to make sure the word gets out. I actually have dreamt of logging on to the Zoom and, there'd be like triple digits down at the bottom of how many folks we've got on for just one affinity group. And so by the end of the year, I want to have heard from as many people as possible, because that is what equity work is about, is making sure that all of our community members feel very heard and valued in the work, and that they see themselves in the work. And we can't do that if we don't ask them. So yeah, hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah, and so even if because our advisory committee was selected and we had lots of applicants, but there's still ways for other people to get involved if they weren't selected for that advisory group. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and we absolutely want to hear from all the various different groups and people throughout the district. So and I just want to make sure that people know that this is really a huge undertaking where we're getting feedback from literally hundreds of people. So
Yes, and I'm excited about it.
How would one of those affinity groups proceed? Is it, I've been in some Zoom meetings where you break out into little groups and you have a few minutes, like the Courageous Conversations moments, and then you come back and reflect. Is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the first one, the structure will look a lot like a town hall, because we want to make sure that we're hearing what issues are important to that affinity group. We don't want to come with this agenda about what we think the community needs to hear. We will update them with things, like we want to keep them informed. But the very first one for each affinity will be us listening. It will be a listening session for us. And then for every meeting after that, we will then tackle the things that they have brought up, whether it's bringing in speakers to speak to some of the things that they've asked, providing resources, or creating subcommittee groups off of the District Equity Advisory Committee to then work on some of the things that have been brought up in those community meetings.
So not only the hundreds of people Julie kind of summed up from there, but the potential for thousands of people to become involved and engage in this is what that sounds like to me. I'm really looking forward to the listening sessions.
Me too.
I was going to say it's probably thousands, not hundreds.
Hundreds on the committees in the schools, thousands participating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the dream. Any other questions?
Thanks, Clarissa.
Okay.
Thank
you,
Clarissa.
Sure. I'll sing next time.
You can do your performance asynchronously, tape it, and then send it to us.
All right. Next up is our, what is it, legislative update? Is that correct?
I think that is.
Yes,
Before
legislative update.
Rob's probably got some things to say. I want to mention one of the things that I heard in the meeting this morning. Well, one of the things I heard this morning was that, and I'm sure you've heard about this too, Rob, a lot of this session is going to be virtual. And they practiced apparently yesterday how to run virtual meetings and a virtual floor session, just to kind of walk through the logistics of how that works. I think the takeaway for Monica and Paul was that there's going to be very few bills passed this session because they're going to have a hard time making this all work. Like if probably a lot of you have been up there, the House, when you go visit the House representatives, their offices are so small. I think bringing the numbers of people into those small quarters, they'd have a hard time social distancing and trying to bring people together. So the Senate has, a better situation, but I think to make it somewhat even, it means that a lot of this is going to be remote. I don't know that many of these folks are even going to end up going to Olympia for this session. So that potentially becomes problematic from the perspective of getting things done. So that's just informational. I was texting with Melissa just now. So the meeting that will occur around finance for school districts that myself and Gavin and somebody from probably Brett from Vancouver will participate in includes Representative Ormsby, who is the appropriations chair, Representative Sullivan, Pat Sullivan, who is the second in charge behind the speaker, and then Representative Berquist, who is the lead on education funding. So it's a great opportunity for us to get with 3 of the leaders in the House of Representatives on school finance and how that impacts us. So actually looking forward to that. Going to be a good opportunity for us. And that's really, I mean, I think we're still just waiting to see what happens in the session. I mentioned some of the other things. Rob's probably got some follow-up from the WASDA work that he's done.
As far as, oh yeah, I had the legislative committee meeting in which we talked about, there's a lot of, the sense that I have is from, I think I've already shown the list of priorities that came out of WASDA and how aligned it is with our top 5. Is that our top 5 and the statewide top 5 are essentially the same thing. So that we're worried about the structure even without the pandemic, and smaller districts are hurting more with the inequities. And that's really saying something because we know of the inequities that are going around here. But other than that, it was more about packaging the messaging into that top 3 sort of statement about here's how you can help kids, here's what the positive work could be from the legislators for kids, irrespective of party or partisan philosophy. And in my discussions, let's see, I've had discussions with Paul and Monica, Milan Tai from out of Bellevue, was in a political meeting with her about an issue. And there's a real consistency even from the engaged R's about school funding, that this is not something that we should ignore or agree to lose. So the sense is a cautious hope, but it really just, there's nothing else that anybody's been able to say about the upcoming session or how to prioritize, because they're as lost in the woods as any other big institution. And they could probably take some cues from WASDA on how to hold a parliamentary meeting now that we've held 1 or 2 successfully, but so they might do that. And that's all. There's not really anything substantial or really any calls to action, except that if you have a personal relationship with a legislator, now is the time to say hello and kind of see what the temperature is.
All right, thanks, Rob. Anyone else have anything for legislative? All right, board meeting debrief. I think that's all we have left.
I'll make it quick. I think
All right.
everything went well. It was great to have the updates. So any comments, concerns, questions, suggestions from all of
Really
you?
appreciative of how fast you guys moved to put the sexual health presentation together and how clear it was. Thank you, Crystal and Aaron, for that. Thanks so much. It really helps ratify some of the things that I've been explaining to parents as they ask the questions. And I appreciate the resources. So getting that into the agenda so quickly, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right.
That's all I have.
Oh, go
I'll
ahead.
try to
Katie.
talk less next time.
I was saying
Victoria?
that's all I have left.
Okay. Victoria, Rachel, you have anything? Oh. All right. I guess we're done.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Have a
Thank
good
you. Have
night.
a good night.
We'll see you.
All right.
Take
Bye.
care.